Thanks for being here. My name's Nolan West. I currently represent Ham Lake, Blaine, and Columbus, and I currently serve in Republican leadership as an assistant minority leader. The majority of Minnesotans agree that the time to end marijuana prohibition is here. In my experience, I would argue there's a lot of Republican voters, if not a majority of Republican voters, that support legalization as well. And we have a great diversity of opinions in our Republican caucus. However, this bill isn't just legalization. I mean, the only public safety benefit of legalization is the elimination of the black market. And when we talk about public safety, it's important to leave your ideology at the door, because public safety is too important. And this bill is infected with a lot of far-left ideology. Eliminating the black market will require a low-cost product. But the anti-business ideology in this bill will make that much more difficult. It is a complicated licensing system, and it doesn't allow businesses to vertically integrate, which would lead to lower-cost marijuana. Their far-left ideology also has the bill distributing licenses based on social equity scores, not just the effectiveness of their business model. And it deliberately puts marijuana businesses in areas of high poverty. And unfortunately, even legal marijuana businesses are cash businesses. And we've seen in other states, they've become targets for burglary. Putting them there does not help those communities. It doesn't. It prioritizes their social equity ideology over public safety. And Minnesotans definitely don't support that. The bill also doesn't allow for significant local control. If you read the local control portion of the bill, you can tell it's written very politically. It talks about schools and daycares, but only because that's what they're afraid of being attacked on. It doesn't allow for meaningful control from the residents who live in the areas that they're going to put these businesses. The bill as it stands now will severely damage the existing legal hemp industry. And they've demonstrated that we can have intoxicating THC in this state without the sky falling. They have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars and employed many Minnesotans. And this bill, as it stands right now, pulls the rug out from under them and hangs them out to dry. We also need to protect our medical marijuana program that serves 50,000 Minnesotans with a variety of ailments from ALS to cancer. And we need to ensure that they continue to have access to the medical marijuana. All that being said, I myself will be supporting the bill on the floor today. Representative Stevenson has taken many amendments that I've proposed, like lowering the amounts of possession from 5 pounds to 1.5 pounds, which I think it could be a little lower, but that's significant progress, and he's been open. And funding $10 million for drug recognition enforcement officers in the bill as well. We will have amendments on the floor today that will address some of these concerns that I lay out here. And I'm hopeful that Representative Stevenson will continue to work collaboratively with the minority during conference committee. Republicans stand ready to work with the majority to ensure that this legalization bill is what's best for Minnesotans. I look forward to taking your questions, but first I would like to introduce Representative Kristen Robbins.
Thanks, Nolan. Hi, I'm Representative Kristen Robbins. I represent District 37A, which is Maple Grove, the cities of Corcoran, Medina, Greenfield, Independence, Loretto, and Maple Plain. And I'm here also as part of the diverse perspective in the Republican Party and in our caucus. So I will not be voting for the bill today. But my concerns are similar to the things Nolan raised. And I think there's a broad array of viewpoints in the party and among our caucus. There are some people who support legalization, some people who support decriminalization, some people who support expungement, but we all, no matter where you land on those issues, this bill has a lot of flaws, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So kind of trying to put it in three buckets, as Nolan talked about. First, I have some significant concerns about the substance use disorder and the impact on young people. And then local control and public safety. And so my concerns are a little bit different than Nolan, but similar. And I think, there's been some polling, I think, from last fall that said 56% of Minnesotans support legalization. But I think I haven't seen the poll questions, but my guess is if you put a finer point on some of those questions, Minnesotans would also have concerns, because that's what I've been hearing from parents in my district, from schools in my district, from mayors. So I do think it's a very nuanced issue in that we need to take our time. And the advocates are saying Minnesota is ready. And I would say Minnesota is not ready for this. So just a couple points. We'll have larger discussions on this on the floor today as we go through our amendments. But young people are at severe risk as their brain are developing if they start using marijuana. And there are a lot of academic studies that show that. There are increases of anxiety, depression, psychosis, and a syndrome called Cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which causes people to throw up violently. And there's a lot of documentation on this happening all over the country. And we've also found a significant increase in cannabis poisonings in states that have legalized it, and even here in Minnesota. So in 2016, we had 231 incidents of cannabis poisoning, 368 last year. That's up 59%. And the rates are even higher in the states that have it legalized. And we're also going to talk about the potency. A lot of cannabis flower is much higher potent than it was back in the 70s. The average potency back in the 70s was 1 to 3 THC. And today's marijuana flower, it's 15 to 17% THC. But what's most concerning is that there are concentrates now, and they come in waxes and oils, and those can have up to 90 or 95% concentrate. And this bill has no limits on the concentrate of these products. And those high concentrate products, which are usually vaped, those really are creating a lot of the adverse mental health effects, particularly in our young people. So these are serious things that even people who support legalization really think Minnesota needs to take a step back and deal with. Nolan did talk quite a bit about the local control issue, and I would say that what I'm hearing is that cities want the ability to regulate the number of licenses in their state, in their jurisdiction. They do not have that. You cannot deny a license, and you also cannot revoke a license. So even though cities are given the enforcement responsibilities, if they find a problem, they cannot revoke a license like they do with alcohol. They have to call the Office of Cannabis Management, and that's not local control, and that's not what cities want. So I would just point that out. And then finally, on public safety, we have seen from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety that there's been a 6% increase in injury car accidents and a 4% increase in fatal accidents in the states with legalization. And that's significant for our law enforcement, who already are really under the gun in so many ways. And there is no standard for impairment in the bill, and there is no test for roadside intoxication. So we do need the DREs, the drug recognition experts, and I'm grateful that there is more money in the bill on this. But if you read the fiscal note, the police had asked for about 200 or 250 officers. The fiscal note says we're going to get 5. So clearly they are not meeting the needs that law enforcement say they need to adequately deal with this problem. So those are just some of the highlights of the concerns that those of us who don't support this bill are going to raise on the floor today. And like I said, there's a diverse perspective in our caucus and among the public, and we get that. But we want Minnesota, if they go down this path, to have a bill that is really well thought out. We saw sort of the consequences of rolling out the edibles last year with no framework and no guidance, and it was a train wreck, and we don't want that to happen with legalization of marijuana, because this will have even more significant consequences. So happy to take your questions. Yeah.
Yeah, you spoke of poisonings
Yeah.
in legal states that are legal. Do we have any knowledge if those poisonings came from controlled, regulated dispensaries, like as far as where the cannabis came from that might have been tainted or whatever? Because I know that in legal states they are regulated and controlled, so I was just wondering if you knew where that source came from, whether it came whether we're seeing the tainted items come out of legalized, regularized dispensaries.
You know, I do not know that. The data I have is from the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, and they do point to that. And I do think that's, though, you point out a question that is of big concern, is that we're not testing adequately the toxology of a fatal crash, how much of it is, how much marijuana would be in the system, but also in the poisoning that's just identified as a poisoning and not from the source. So this data is important to get.
That is one of the reasons why I do support legalization, is so that we can test these substances, because over 50% of people have used cannabis at least once in their life. So people already have access, and they have access with hemp THC right now, which is also intoxicating. So legalizing market is a regulated market where testing can actually happen to make sure, you know, you can't overdose on THC. It's a non-lethal substance, so testing makes sure that it stays that way without fentanyl or something else being in it. And I believe we have some amendments on the floor to ensure that's the case.
President West, could you stay and respond to the statement you made about hemp? We, I think, might agree that that bill was cleverly moved to the legislature last year, didn't go to taxes, didn't go to state government, didn't go to commerce for licensing purposes. Does the industry really think that that's how we're going to keep their industry? Unregulated, untaxed, unlicensed? Which is what I'm hearing from them, that anything more than keeping the status quo would put them all out of business.
That is a superb question. So when I communicate with the hemp industry, a lot of them are very concerned, and that it will completely destroy them. And no matter how this bill turns out, I'll be working hard to help them in conference committee. But you're right, there's going to be taxes, there's going to be testing for their products, which there isn't now. So even if we get a lot of pro-hemp amendments adopted, these hemp businesses are going to have, you know, a less free tax business model. So that's a reality that they do understand. I've been working real hard to come up with language. The Senate bill, I would encourage you to look at, has a lot better language when it comes to the hemp industry. And we're looking to get those adopted in conference committee to at least allow them to, for example, maintain the products they already offer, assuming they will be tested, but we don't want to make something illegal that they're selling right now if it's safe.
Yeah, what are some other amendments you're going to offer aside from hemp changes?
Oh, we have a number. You'll have to just watch the debate. I mean, it'll be, you know, a whole series of amendments dealing with public safety, dealing with the issues we raised, local control, and public health. So that.
Does the current version of the bill still keep you from doing THC and marijuana, cannabis-derived products in the same under the same roof? Is that still? It seems like that was an objection raised early that you couldn't do both under the same roof or in the same business. So, yeah.
Just to clarify, are you saying you can't do hemp-derived edibles and other cannabis on this? Yeah, I believe there's a lot of restriction on the multiple licenses you can have, and they are separate licenses: the low-potency hemp edible license and the cannabis retailer license. I believe you cannot hold both, but the hemp edible license, basically, that's widely available to a lot of different existing businesses, whereas the cannabis retailer license would be your business is only selling cannabis.
Can you touch on the, you know, is it a good idea to have separate licenses for low-dose edibles because somebody who wants to stay in that business won't face you know, the tax implications because it's still a federally illegal substance?
That is a very large concern of the hemp industry, that they're concerned they'll lose a lot of their tax exempt deductions and those kind of things if they're regulated under it. We're, as far as I know, the only state that's had an existing hemp market and then legalized. So it's kind of uncharted waters. My hope is that that license will help protect them rather than make them treated as a federally legal product, because hemp is largely legal at the federal level, but that is a key question that we haven't seen in other states. So we'll have to see how it shakes out.
But that license, isn't it supposed to address it? Because if you have that, you can't get into marijuana. So if you just stick with hemp, it's, you know, descheduled under federal law, so you won't have those same potential hurdles. Does it at all address the concerns you have for the hemp industry? It sounds like no. those changes?
Yeah, the hope is it does, but the concerns the hemp industry has is a lot around definitions of what they're defining a cannabinoid and maintaining the products they already have as legal. And then they also, the label lower potency is kind of misleading because 5 milligrams of hemp-derived THC is basically the same in intoxication as 5 milligrams of what you buy at a cannabis retailer. So that lower potency might confuse the consumer because it's not really lower potency, it's just limited to 5 milligrams. So that's actually changing that definition, just the title of that label. And there's some, I mean, your readers probably won't be interested, but in the definitions of artificially derived cannabinoids, we have to make sure that what they're using currently is legal. And right now, there's some concern about that.
Representative Robin, you kind of mentioned concerns you have personally about cannabis on developing brains. Are you planning, or is anyone in the caucus planning to introduce an amendment about age limits?
Yes, I am. I'll have an amendment on raising the age limit to 25, because the vast majority of the studies show that the brain continues to develop and that the effects for people under age 25 are more long-lasting and more severe. And so, you know, I've been working with, I'm going to forget the name of it, but people from the Minnesota Psychological Association and a doctor of psychiatry at the University of Minnesota, and they've put out statements saying that, you know, this is not advisable. And I serve on the higher ed committee, and during higher ed, a doctor in psychiatry came and was asking the higher ed committee for more funding for more addiction specialists. And when I questioned her about her views on legalizing marijuana, she said clearly in committee that it was not advisable and that the state is just not ready. We do not have enough addiction treatment specialists in the state to deal with what will be coming, so.
And then to kind of bounce off that, in your mind, what is the difference then between cannabis and allowing alcohol, say, at the age of 21, when brains are, like you said, still developing?
You know, I understand that's a concern people would like, and some in our caucus would like just the unified standard, but I think when alcohol was legal at 21, we didn't have all the research we have now, and our young people are struggling. We are in a mental health crisis in this state, and I think, you know, we really need to put in place safeguards that will help protect them as their brain develops. And also, I mean, there's a lot of things that can contribute to mental health issues, but certainly opening the door to something, we've seen the teenage use of marijuana rise in states where it is legal. And the concentrates, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but the concentrates where there's a lot of higher potency from the vaping, that is what is really needing to be addressed, because that seems to be an area where the young people tend to gravitate.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, I mean, the difference there is that alcohol is an already established, you know, allowed substance.
Right.
THC is not in that case.
Right, and other states are considering this. I know the state of Washington, they came out with a study this year recommending raising it to 25, and it didn't happen there, but they are citing the concerns in Washington because of these high concentrate extracts. Back in 2014, that was only 9% of the market in Washington. Now it's 35%. And so based on their experience of legalization and these high potency concentrates, they are at least looking at it. I know it didn't make it through their session this year, but it's being talked about.
So when Representative Mueller brought in the 5-pound bag, what was in that bag again?
That was hemp. Yes, and I have to say, you know, that helped illustrate how much volume this bill is allowing legally. And after that, the chair allowed the reduction from 5 pounds you can keep at home to 1.5 pounds. And, you know, if I may just indulge for a minute, the amounts that you are allowed in this bill to still give out are really high. So you can give away 2 ounces of marijuana legally to someone age 21 or older, and 2 ounces is enough for 168 joints. The 1.5 pounds you're allowed to legally keep in your home is enough for 2,043 joints. So we are, as Nolan was talking about, the black market, we are, on the one hand, legalizing and regulating and testing, but we are also empowering the black market by the way this bill is drafted, because we are allowing people to give away 2 ounces.
Can you, I know it's hard because you've gone through so many committees and you're on the 10th engrossment, but can you think of Republican proposals, and that being one of them, and I think parks as a area you couldn't have stores in was a Republican amendment. Can you think of others that were proposed by Republicans that have been incorporated in the bill as it's going to be presented today?
They did change it to allow parks and schools. Churches are not included in the bill. And, you know, a lot of young people go to youth group and different activities, so.
Can you speak to the, Minnesota was said to have one of the lowest tax rates in the bill? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it sitting at like an 8% tax
Yes.
rate? And that would be on the lower end of the taxation opposed to other states, correct?
Yes, so it's 8%, but the local sales tax and the state sales tax applies as well. So that's why you'll see in some press reports, they're saying 15, because it's combining the state sales tax with the tax specific to the cannabis.
And that is one of the most important parts of the bill. When you look at states like California and New York are cardinal examples of the black market is still alive and well, but when you tax something at 46%, how like, there's just no way. That's just not gonna work. So that is actually one of the better parts of the bill. I suggest, one of the amendments I was trying to get in, and I'll still try and get in conference, is phasing in a tax. So keeping it as low as possible. I would say let's go lower, but let's bake in increases, because we know this is gonna end up like a cigarette tax. I guarantee you, the second we run into a deficit, this is the first thing that we'll be raising taxes on. And I think that is also what Minnesotans expect.
Right, yeah, Minnesotans do think it'll be high tax and it'll solve all the, you know, roads problems or whatever and go into the general fund, and that is not the intent of the author.
I mean, the GOP's been pretty against taxes for the majority of the session. Is this bill different in the sense that, you know, this is an industry that's new and we should be regulating it and taxing it if we can, you know, kind of take advantage of that then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to, they claim it's gonna self-fund, which I don't believe, but the reason for the tax is so that it'll pay for enforcement and pay for substance use disorder treatment and pay for the regulatory framework. I don't think it will, but.
One of the biggest frustrations of this session is when we have a $17.5 billion surplus, we're still getting pennies for tax relief, which is just mind-boggling. But this is one of the areas, like I said, where we'll probably look to increase taxes down the road, but we need to make sure it's affordable to eliminate the black market.
Can I just add to that? You know, the reality is the public expects us to eliminate taxes on things like Social Security income. We should not be taxing income that seniors have already been taxed on. And frankly, we are bleeding people out of this state because of it. To the contrary, when you talk about legalization, the vast majority of folks expect us to tax that and to have revenue from that will certainly cover the cost of the bill. And you know what? You know, I mean, I think those of us who are concerned, and Representative Robbins laid it out very well, particularly public safety concerns, substance use disorder concerns, those come with a cost. Those come with a cost, particularly to our local communities who will bear the brunt of that cost when it comes to public safety. And the public expects us to make sure that we are not taking resources from the general fund or our schools or our nursing homes or anything else to pay to legalize marijuana.
Can someone speak to the expungement provisions, the automatic expungement for the low level, and then the board to consider more serious crimes that also involved possession or marijuana sales?
Well, you basically summed it up. Misdemeanors and petty misdemeanors are automatically expunged. And in Minnesota, we're largely decriminalized already. So that would take care of the vast majority of cases. Those people aren't in jail for marijuana. The idea that there's a ton of people in prison just for marijuana offenses is not real. The number I've heard thrown around is like maybe a couple dozen, 34, yeah. But with the board, I think that is the right direction. But explicitly in the bill, the board cannot expunge a felony if there was harm to somebody else done or if a dangerous weapon was used. even if the board thinks, oh, we like this person. So I think that is a proper way to do expungement if we're going to legalize.
It sounds like as maybe the value statement of what it's supposed to represent for the authors, and also too that we're gonna right the wrongs of cannabis, that you support that idea, the spirit of what it's designed to do. Even if in practice, the automatic expungement is maybe not gonna have as much of an impact because of what you just mentioned, the decriminalization.
If this were just some sort of expungement bill, I think you'd see substantial support from the Republican caucus. We'll have some support for the bill, and especially if it improves in conference committee, there will be more Republican support for the bill. But that is, we don't want people to be punished for crimes that aren't net negative on society, that are just maybe a mistake or something that doesn't harm somebody else. Nobody wants that. The Republican Party doesn't stand for punishing people for something that's not for addiction. That's a great point, Representative Mueller. So I think you'll see a lot of support for that particular portion of the bill from both caucuses.
Is the reason you're concerned about addiction treatment because you believe marijuana is addictive, or is it because they'll be taking other drugs in conjunction with marijuana?
Both.
Yeah, as a pro side, you might find, I agree with Representative Robbins here. The people who say marijuana is not addictive, I know many people who are addicted to marijuana that can't go 2 hours without it. And to say it's not addictive is wrong, but to say it's dangerous, I would argue is also wrong because you can't overdose on THC. And that's why regulating and testing is incredibly important. But addiction, it is, I would argue it's less dangerous to be addicted to it than, say, alcohol, which will kill you. But it is still something that will happen, and people who say otherwise, I don't believe are being honest.
Do any of you guys have experience with cannabis in your heyday before you got into this? I'm just wondering from personal, knowledgeable experience, truthfully, respectfully.
Can you talk about how you balanced your concerns with the bill and the pros that you see, and how you came out on the side that you are going to vote in favor of it?
Yeah, I voted for it last time, House File 600, when it was up last time. That, I would say, is a better bill. And then when this came out, I wanted to support it, but there were, as we already went over, a lot of concerns. The reason I'm voting for it is because Representative Stevenson has worked with me personally to get some of these changes, and he's assured me that we will continue to work, that my vote doesn't just mean that they're done addressing the concerns that I have. And I'm seeking to serve on the conference committee so that I can continue to have influence on the bill and make it something that we can have broad bipartisan support for.
Anybody else?
Yes, any insight on if the Senate has the votes needed for their version?
I haven't heard that they do, but you might know more.
So I would say the Senate does have the votes, but they don't want to go through the kneecapping and leg breaking that will take to get to 34. So from where I'm standing, now they can speak for themselves, I expect them to pass their full budget. The bill has to originate in the House because it has taxes in it. And then they'll go to work ensuring they get 34. I would say they have almost 34. My advice to my Senate Republican colleagues would be, if you don't support the bill, well, that's okay, but if you can make the bill better, you definitely should make the bill better, because you better believe they don't want to be kneecapping their members if they don't have to. So I think there's an opportunity. The bill's already better than the Senate, especially around hemp issues. I think it can be improved even more so, especially because they'll get the 34. Anybody who thinks they won't get the 34, I think is wishful thinking. But I don't think they want to go through the work that it will take to get to 34.
Thank you. Thank you.